And the verdict is... So if you're just checking in, part 1 of this 3-part series is Monty, the suburban sodbuster, helping me convert a Langstroth hive to Layens. Part 2 was me preparing to introduce a new virgin queen because the queen that was in the hive was a failed queen, a queen that wasn't laying eggs. So in this part 3, I'm going to show you how I introduced the new queen and whether or not it worked. Let's do this thing. Okay, so part 1 was capturing and killing the emergency queen. So I have to do a huge shout out to Cory Stevens from the Stevens Bee Company, which is where I got my queen bee from. He's only a couple hours from me, which is great. So I actually went and picked up the queen because I know traveling can be kind of hard on him. I wanted to do everything I could to maximize my chances of this hive succeeding. But this is my first year beekeeping. I'm totally new at all of this. And Cory was really patient. So I'm going to give you a visual of what our text conversation looked like, word for word. Here we go. And this is right after he gave me directions to where his house was and how I could pick up the queen. She's in the orange box by my willow star in the white bucket. Excellent. And I just set that in the hive. You got it. They'll candy release her in 24 to 36 hours. Okay, thank you for your help. If you added brood recently, you may want to tape over the candy release and put her in the middle of the bees and wait a few days to cut cells, then pull the tape. After pulling the tape, give her 2.5 weeks before checking to make sure she's laying. There's no brood, so I'll just put her right in unless you advise otherwise, etc. I'll be home around 4. Do you recommend removing the emergency queen immediately and putting the new queen in around 7 or 8? Or keeping her indoors overnight and putting her in first thing in the morning? I would put her in the hive ASAP. You can tape over the candy if you don't have time to look for queen cells. It's raining over here. Thank you. So the whole orange container is candy? And they chew holes in it? It's more, plastic-like than I expected. She's inside in a little candy cage. If you open the orange box, you'll see her in a small white candy cage with attendant. Just add the small cage. If you added brood within the last 7 days, I would tape over the candy and hold her for the remainder of the 7 days, cut cells, then let them eat through the candy to set her loose. If there are any young larvae left, they will reject her. Okay, so I take her out of the orange cage. You'd never guess I'm new at this. No worries. Only way to learn. All that to say, the plastic container is just a plastic container. The candy release was inside. So we opened up the orange container to get the candy release out. There was at least one dead attendant inside, but that's probably why there's multiple, so that they can all pitch in and help her out. And my daughter then helped me get into the Sun and Moon Hive as she was all suited up as well. And we went ahead and captured the emergency queen, and she was holding it for me. So we went back over, and I risked just setting her into the orange box. And just the other day, I watched Monty, the suburban sodbuster's new video where he had an emergency, or a queen that wasn't yet mated, and she flew off. And so after watching that, I thought, whew, I dodged a bullet there because I got her out and she didn't fly away. So as per one recommendation from Raising Honeybee Queens, I crushed the emergency queen against the candy release tube. Part of the reason I did this was because the directions on the Stevens Bee Company website, he has a lot of great directions, and the directions say that you're supposed to remove the queen bee at least 4 to 8 hours before you introduce the virgin queen. I think in large part because you want her to be accepted, and so you want the hive to be hopelessly queenless. And that's why in our dialogue he was mentioning that if there's any larvae, you need to watch for any queen cells and remove the queen cells because they would reject the queen and make their own if there was any larvae. And again, I just wanted to do everything I could to boost the chances of this because as I kept reading, it seemed less and less likely that this was going to work. So we took the candy release tube with the crushed emergency queen back to the hive.
Like you were the ones who took our queen.
And kill her. And my camera woman got a little distracted, and you can see our lovely pine needles and more pine needles. But she did have some good questions. She asked,
Are they gonna help her get out?
and
Are they gonna mark her?
that would be. So the answer to the first question is yes, they're gonna help her get out, either to start attending to her or to kill her. The answer to the second question, am I gonna mark her? The answer is I would like to, but I don't have the supplies yet. I think people use different things. You could probably use something as simple as fingernail polish to mark them, but there are pens specifically for marking queens. Now, one thing that I was unaware of until Monty came to help me convert the hive was that there's a method to the madness of marking queen bees. I didn't know there was any sort of rhyme to it, but there's an international standard of what color you're supposed to mark the bee depending on what year it is. So here's a little graph. Oh, wait. That's the wrong queen. So if you look at this chart, you can see that if the number of the year ends in a 1 or a 6, you'll mark the queen with white or gray, I guess. If the year ends in a 2 or a 7, you'll mark her with yellow. If the year ends in 3 or 8, you'll mark her with red. If the year ends in 4 or 9, you'll mark her with green. And if the year ends with a 5 or a 0, you'll mark her with blue. So this is 2022. So for me this year, all 4 of my colonies right now, and more if I get more, will be marked with a yellow marker. Makes sense because that way when you look back at your hives and if you forgot or lost track, you'll know exactly how old your queen is. So I removed the feeder that I had put in there because they didn't have a queen, just to kind of ease the stress a little bit. It was empty. I dumped out the sticks that were in there to enable the bees to float if they got stuck in there, and dumped the remaining bees back into the hive. I have not filled that since, and I don't plan to fill it again. That's just kind of an emergency thing, a very temporary measure to take. And then part 2 was checking back in 2.5 weeks. I had to wait, but you don't. So I don't have too much time before my next class starts, but I'm really excited to see, kind of anxious to see, if this sun and moon colony is doing okay. It was just about 2.5 weeks ago that I gave them their new queen. I'm really hoping that today I'm gonna find brood. If not, this colony is probably a lost cause, but if we do find brood, then we should be in good shape. I didn't have too much hope because somebody in the Layens Facebook group pointed out that all these bees are going to be a little bit older, and so they might not be able to produce the royal jelly that the brood would need, that the larvae would need. But then Monty gave me some hope, the suburban sodbuster, that they can revert to their previous roles like nurse bees and feeder bees when the need arises. So let's go see what we find. Okay. Still seeing activity. Hopefully that's a good sign. So of course I found the candy release and took that out, and now it was time to look for a brood. So on the last few frames, I either found nothing or some honey, which was great, but not brood. On the second to last frame, you can tell I'm studying it very carefully, not quite sure what I'm looking at. I think if I remember correctly, it was mainly just capped honey on this frame. And then when I got to this last frame, do you see that? Okay, let's fast forward a little bit. And let's pause there. Do you see that? And do you see my confused face? My friends, that is brood. All the other brood I've seen up until this time has been kind of an orangey amber, almost brown color. So this is the brightest brood I've seen, capped brood. And so I didn't know what it was. I wondered if it was honey. I am still in awe of beekeepers that don't suit up when they're working. I'm curious what you think as you continue to watch this hive, if they seem particularly aggressive or if I'm just a baby, because it seems to me that I would get stung a lot if I wasn't wearing a suit. So I'm thankful for my Comfort Pro suit, or jacket. And so I ran inside and I took a screenshot of the recording and I put it on the Layens treatment-free Facebook group and I said, please give me good news, is this brood? And everybody said, yes, it's brood. So now I know brood can also be yellow. So that means the verdict is a success. They accepted the new queen, she had a successful mating flight, and now she's laying. And again, I teach online Spanish classes, as we say in my Spanish classes, celebración means celebration. So I'm really excited that the introduction seems to have been a success. They're doing well. I have done a check since then. They seem to be expanding kind of slowly, but again, this is my first year. They have to build all the comb from scratch, so I think I just need to be patient with them and with myself. I've been hearing people in the Layens group and otherwise in other parts of the country saying, wow, yep, I gave them a 12, 14 frame hive and they filled it all up already. And that's not the case for me, and it's probably not going to be the case for me, especially in my first year, despite being in Missouri where there are a lot of resources for the bees. So anyway, thank you so much for coming along and for seeing that this was a success.